going to talk in this video about some useful reference resources for birds. There is a lot of great information out there on bird biology, and so I'm going to share just a couple of resources. Some of you have already probably become familiar with some of these. Okay. One great resource is eBird. There's also this website called All About Birds. Both are run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And you can type in any North American bird, and I think it's expanding to worldwide, that you might be interested in. I'm going to just type in northern cardinal because that's what's up here. And it will take me to an overview of this species. So I can actually go to northern cardinal, and it's got all sorts of information. I can listen to it. I can learn the basic field marks for identifying this bird, and I can look at the range map. Let me actually see if I can get a search for a more common local bird. Let's say song sparrow. Yeah, this is a local bird that is not that easy to identify for new people because it's one of your little brown birds, as they say, but it's very common and it has a distinctive song. And so you'll come up with this page about song sparrow. You can listen to its song. And there will be other media. It will tell you about how to identify it. And it'll tell you about what it eats, what kind of habitats it lives in, if it's under any kind of conservation risk. It shows you a nice range map. You can look up this bird on eBird as well. It gives you this great list of cool facts about the bird, and is a really nice general overview of this bird. You can actually access a variety of maps and a variety of sounds from this site, and it's useful. Now, for research projects, it could be a good start to start with All About Birds, but there is actually a much more sophisticated version of All About Birds that Cornell runs. It used to be called the Birds of North America Online, and now it has merged with another large database called the Birds of the World. And so that's a pay-for service, but our library has access to Birds of the World. And so I always recommend, if somebody's going to do a bird-focused project and they're trying to find literature, that is always a nice stop, first stop for birds. And so if I go to our library website and search for Birds of the World, it will pull up this database. And you have to sign in using your evergreen username and password to access it, to get full access. But once you do that, you can go to this Birds of the World site. And so I encourage folks, any bird that you've been thinking about today, try to access the Birds of the World site through Evergreen's library and type in a species. So let's type in song sparrow. We can compare what we see here to what we found on All About Birds. You still have lots of nice image, video, and sound files available to you. You have an introduction with these really sophisticated range maps. And what you have here is a much more scientific synthesis of this bird. Okay, and it actually references you to eBird observations. And in here you have literature cited. Okay, and we'll come back to that. So there's an introduction, and then there are these various sections on appearance, the systematics, the evolutionary relationships of this bird, its distribution. And so you can actually read about its historical distributions and any changes in its distribution. You can read about if the bird has movements and migration. You can read about that. Diet and foraging, sounds and vocal behavior. There's been a lot of very interesting research on song sparrows actually in the Pacific Northwest about their vocalizations and the purposes that they serve. And so you'll be able to find a lot of that research in this synthesis page on song sparrows. Okay, and so you'll see there's a lot of information about their songs and the geographic variation, daily patterns, of their songs, okay, as well as their vocal repertoires, which is the collections of songs that birds will use in different contexts. So lots of information here. Behavior, you will learn about all sorts of aspects of their breeding, from their timing of breeding, how they choose a nest site, how many eggs they tend to lay, the incubation period, hatching period, all of this sort of thing. And so lots of information, demography and population patterns. This might be, sometimes people are interested in that. You might get information on whether they're declining or not. Song sparrows aren't known to be in particular risk right now. Conservation and management sections, and even a priorities for future research section. That's something that people are often curious to know. Hey, what about the bird I'm interested in? Is there something more to be learned from them? And so for song sparrows, they're pretty well studied, but it does provide some recommendations. You can then, there's an acknowledgments section and about the authors section. Also a revision history, so you can actually see when it was last updated. And then here's a complete list of references that were used to inform this page. And so you can use those references. If there's a section of this account, species account, that you find particularly interesting, for instance, the Beecher articles are really focused on the song repertoires of these birds, or done in actually Discovery. A lot of these studies were done in Discovery Park in Seattle. You can actually go and you get full reference information here. You can go look for those articles and use those as a starting point for your research. And so you'll see all sorts of articles, very extensive reference section on this species here. I keep going and going and going. Additional references. Okay, so lots of information. You can look at the revision history. The revision history is useful in that it can give you the last time, it can tell you the last time it was updated. Okay, so so the last published version was in 2013, and then it looks like it was actually fairly recently updated on March 4th, 2020. So that is pretty recent. So you can get an idea of how recent your research is that you're using. And so those are really good references. I'm going to go back to this reference section just really quickly because there's, as you're starting to look for references in the literature, you might take, say, this, I'm going to go to the Beecher reference since we're just talking about these vocal repertoires. It's one of the more interesting, of the many interesting things of song sparrows. Let me just add a search page. I'm going to go to Google Scholar, and you can enter this article, and you can find it. And you can also find it through our databases in the library, but you can actually find some of these articles. The interesting thing is you can find more reference information here, but you can also see who is citing these articles. And when you, I'll go backwards, and so I selected cited by here, and these are all the articles that have cited the Beecher article. And some of them might be quite relevant, and one thing we know about them is that they're all more current than that article, so it helps you to get really current literature. So hopefully you find some of these tools useful as you're going about starting your research project.